My name is Michael Adams, and I've always believed that the holiday season was a time of togetherness, joy, and the unbreakable bonds of family. Every December, our extended Adams family gathered at our ancestral home for a grand Christmas party, a celebration of tradition, love, and memories that span generations. This year was to be no different, as we prepared for a special gender party in honor of our unborn child. Yet, beneath the twinkling lights and festive decor, an ominous undercurrent was stirring, a secret that would shatter everything I thought I knew. My wife, Emily, had been the heart of our celebrations for as long as I could remember. Her radiant smile and gentle warmth made every gathering feel like home. In the weeks leading up to the party, she poured her heart into every detail, from handcrafted ornaments to the perfect menu that blended cherished family recipes with modern twists. The house filled with the scent of cinnamon, pine, and freshly baked gingerbread, while classic carols played softly in the background. Everything appeared picture-perfect, yet I couldn't help but notice small, unsettling details. At first, it was just a fleeting glance, a moment when Emily's eyes darted away as if hiding something when I casually asked about her plans for the day. Then came the hushed phone calls in the early morning, her voice low and measured, as if speaking in a secret language. I rationalized these oddities as the normal stress of hosting a major event, especially one as significant as our child's gender party. But an uneasiness took root in me, a whisper of doubt that grew louder with each passing day. The day before the party, while I was helping set the table, I caught a glimpse of Emily in the corridor. She was speaking softly on the phone, her expression tense, and then, almost imperceptibly, she brushed her hand over a small framed photograph on a side table. The photo, I later discovered, was of my own grandfather, Edward Adams, a man I had long revered as a symbol of wisdom, kindness, and the continuity of our family legacy. Grandfather Edward's presence at every gathering had always been a comfort to me, a living link to our family's proud history. But that evening, the way Emily looked at his picture struck me as odd, an intensity in her eyes that I could not ignore. As the party drew near, I found myself increasingly distracted. In quiet moments, while Emily flitted about making final adjustments to the decorations, I would catch her stealing glances toward the mantel where Grandfather Edward's portrait hung in a place of honor. At one point, I noticed her linger a little too long, as if absorbed in a memory or a secret thought. A shiver ran down my spine as I began to piece together a growing pattern of behavior that no amount of holiday cheer could mask. I tried to push these unsettling feelings aside, telling myself that the pressure of preparing for such an important event could easily make anyone act strangely. I busied myself with the logistical details, confirming the arrival of distant relatives, ensuring the sound system was working perfectly for the scheduled carols, and making sure the food table was flawless. Outside, the winter air was crisp and filled with the promise of a joyful celebration, yet inside, I wrestled with a gnawing suspicion that threatened to unravel the fabric of our family life. Late that evening, after most of the guests had arrived and the room buzzed with laughter and heartfelt greetings, I slipped away for a brief moment of solitude in our study. There, by the flickering light of a single candle, I reviewed some old family albums. I lingered on a particular photograph of Grandfather Edward, a dignified man with kind eyes and a reassuring smile, surrounded by generations of Adams. As I stared at his image, a disturbing thought invaded my mind. Had I ever noticed a secret tenderness in Emily's gaze whenever he was mentioned? The memory was hazy, but it filled me with an inexplicable dread. With the sound of festive music drifting in through the open door, I closed the album and resolved to remain vigilant. I knew that tonight, amid the laughter and clinking glasses, I might finally uncover the truth. The party was a celebration of new beginnings for our child, a symbol of hope and unity, but as the evening unfolded, it was clear that hidden beneath the veneer of joy was a secret that could shatter our family forever. I returned to the party with a heavy heart, forcing a smile as I greeted guests and exchanged pleasantries. Yet, every warm hug and merry toast was tainted by the weight of what I might soon discover. I vowed to keep my suspicions to myself just a little longer, waiting for the right moment to confront the growing darkness. Little did I know that by the end of the night, I would be forced to face a betrayal so profound that the meaning of family, love, and loyalty would be forever redefined. The morning of the gender party arrived crisp and bright, a deceptive promise of joy amid the chaos of my swirling thoughts. I awoke early, determined to play the role of the proud, loving husband despite the nagging dread that had taken residence in my heart. As I dressed in my best suit and helped Emily with the final touches on the decor, I could feel the pulse of anticipation in every corner of our home. The scent of pine and roasted chestnuts mingled with the soft strains of holiday music, and outside, laughter echoed from the street as neighbors prepared for their own celebrations. Throughout the morning, I busied myself ensuring that every detail was perfect. The dining room table was set with vintage china and sparkling crystal, a nod to generations of Adams tradition. I moved among the guests with practiced ease, greeting family members with a warmth that belied the inner turmoil I was experiencing. Yet, even as I exchanged pleasantries, my eyes were drawn to Emily, always at the center of the festivities, yet with moments when her gaze drifted toward a particular corner of our living room. That corner held a place of honor, a display table featuring a large, framed portrait of grandfather Edward Adams. His image, stern yet benevolent, had been a fixture at every family gathering, a symbol of the enduring legacy of our lineage. But today, something about that portrait, and the way Emily interacted with it, set my pulse racing. I noticed that whenever she passed by, she would slow down, almost in a trance, and gently caress the frame as if drawing comfort from his presence. It was a subtle gesture, easily dismissed in the bustle of the party, yet for me it became an increasingly disturbing motif. As the party reached its crescendo, the time came for the gender reveal, a moment that was meant to usher in celebration and hope for the future. Guests gathered in a semicircle around the large table, eyes sparkling with anticipation as Emily prepared to make her announcement. I stood at her side, heart pounding, wondering if the truth I feared might finally be laid bare. The reveal was planned as a dramatic burst of colored confetti that would signal whether our baby would be a boy or a girl, a moment of pure, unadulterated joy. But as Emily stepped forward to speak, my attention was momentarily captured by a whispered conversation from the far side of the room. I watched, hidden behind a cluster of holiday decorations, as Emily slipped away from the main gathering. My instincts urged me to follow, and I trailed her at a distance, keeping to the shadows of the hallway. The noise of the party faded behind me as I navigated the quieter corridors of our sprawling home. Soon, I found her in a secluded sitting area, a room draped in soft lighting and filled with antique furniture that belonged to a bygone era. There, in a hush that stood in stark contrast to the festive clamor outside, Emily was not alone. Across from her sat grandfather Edward. The sight was almost too surreal to comprehend. The man I had always admired, whose wisdom and kindness had guided our family through countless trials, now appeared in an intimate and secretive embrace with the woman I loved. They spoke in low, urgent tones, their body language betraying a closeness that went far beyond familial affection. Emily's eyes shone with an emotion I could no longer deny, a blend of longing, guilt, and something altogether forbidden. For a long, agonizing moment, I stood frozen, hidden in the doorway, as the scene before me unfolded in excruciating detail. My heart hammered in my chest, each beat echoed like a drum of impending doom. I could barely process what I was witnessing, the unthinkable betrayal of my wife with my own grandfather, a man I had trusted implicitly, now entwined with her in a secret that defied every convention of decency and love. The world around me seemed to shatter. I felt as though the very foundation of my existence was crumbling, the joyous promise of the day reduced to a cruel illusion. Every smile and every warm greeting from earlier now felt like a lie. I clenched my fists and took a trembling step back, desperate to escape the scene yet unable to tear my eyes away. Back in the midst of the party, the revelry continued unabated. The joyful chaos of the gender reveal, pink and blue confetti exploding into the air, laughter, and exclamations of delight, stood in stark contrast to the dark secret festering behind closed doors. I returned to the crowd with a heavy heart, determined to maintain the facade of normalcy as I grappled with the knowledge of what I had seen. Every laugh, every toast, was now tainted by the betrayal I carried within me. That night, as the party wound down and guests began to depart, I felt isolated in a sea of empty cheer. I lingered in the quiet aftermath, the echoes of the celebration mingling with the silent storm of my thoughts. I knew that sooner or later, I would have to confront Emily about what I had witnessed. The pain of betrayal was too great to ignore, yet the truth was something I wasn't sure I could bear. With the festive remnants of the day scattered around me, the deflated balloons, the discarded ribbons, and the faint scent of pine, I realized that my life had been forever altered. I retired to my study that night. The images of Emily and grandfather Edward burned into my memory. The gentle hum of a distant Christmas carol offered no solace against the raging tempest of emotions inside me. I sat at my desk, hands trembling, as I began to write down every detail of the day, the strange looks, the hushed conversations, and the undeniable proof of betrayal. In that quiet solitude, I resolved that the painful truth must eventually be confronted, even if it meant shattering the remaining illusions of my once perfect life. The shock of that fateful night weighed heavily on me in the days that followed. Sleep eluded me as I wrestled with a tumult of emotions: anger, sorrow, disbelief, and an aching sense of betrayal. I replayed the moment I had witnessed Emily's clandestine meeting with Grandfather Edward over and over in my mind, each replay intensifying the sting of the revelation. The joyous anticipation of our child's future now stood in stark opposition to the agony of realizing that the person I loved had betrayed me in the most unthinkable way. By the morning of the next family gathering, a much smaller, intimate follow-up meant to smooth over any residual tension from the night before, I knew that I could no longer remain silent. I needed answers. My heart pounded as I approached Emily in the quiet of our living room, where the soft light of winter morning filtered through sheer curtains. The air was thick with unspoken words, and the lingering scent of pine did nothing to mask the bitterness that now filled the space between us. "Emily," I began, my voice low and trembling with controlled fury, "we need to talk, now." Her eyes, once filled with warmth and love, now held a flicker of fear and guilt. She hesitated, as if bracing herself for the inevitable confrontation. I continued, barely able to contain the anguish in my tone. "I know what I saw last night. I saw you with Grandfather Edward." The words burst from me, heavy with betrayal and sorrow. For a long, suspended moment, silence reigned. Emily's face paled, and tears welled in her eyes as she struggled for words. "Michael, I can explain," she stammered, her voice barely audible. But I could feel the weight of the truth pressing down on us both, the gulf between us widening with each unspoken moment. "Explain?" I echoed bitterly, my voice rising with each syllable. "Explain how our family, our home, our sacred traditions, could be tarnished by such a secret? How could you betray everything we've built together, not just with me, but with the very man I looked up to as a symbol of our heritage?" My voice cracked under the strain of suppressed emotion, and I took a step closer, my eyes locked onto hers with a mix of desperation and resolve. Emily's tears fell freely now as she tried to gather her thoughts. "Michael, I was lonely," she began haltingly. "I felt trapped in a life that was so predictable. I needed something more, something to make me feel alive. Grandfather Edward, he understood me in a way I never thought possible. I'm so sorry, I never meant for it to hurt you." Her words, intended to offer some explanation, only deepened the wound. Every syllable felt like a betrayal, a reminder that the trust between us had been shattered beyond repair. I turned away momentarily, struggling to steady my breathing. The hurt was overwhelming, and I could feel my world crumbling around me. "Lonely," I repeated in a voice filled with incredulity. "How could you seek comfort, intimacy, or even a fleeting escape in the arms of my own grandfather, a man who has been the cornerstone of our family for generations?" The accusation hung in the air, bitter and undeniable. Grandfather Edward, who had been uncomfortably silent until now, stepped forward. His normally dignified voice was laced with regret as he spoke. "Michael, I never intended for any of this to happen. I have always respected you and this family. I made a terrible mistake, and I am deeply sorry." His words, meant to offer some form of contrition, only served to intensify the surreal horror of the moment. The room seemed to shrink as the reality of our broken lives pressed in. I felt as though I were standing at the edge of an abyss, a point of no return. Every cherished memory, every promise of love and fidelity, was now tainted by the knowledge of Emily's betrayal. "I trusted you," I whispered, my voice raw with pain. "I believed in us. I believed in our family." The confession was both a plea and an accusation, a desperate call for answers from a heart that felt irreparably betrayed. Emily reached out as if to bridge the gap between us, but I recoiled from her touch. I can't accept this," I managed to say, each word dripping with anguish. "How do I move forward when everything I held dear has been violated?" My voice faltered as I searched her face for any sign of remorse or regret that might make the unbearable truth easier to swallow. But all I saw was a mirror of my own sorrow, a shared pain that could never be undone. The confrontation stretched on, every word a dagger in the fragile remnants of my trust. Family photographs on the wall, once symbols of a united legacy, now looked down upon us as silent witnesses to our downfall. The future of our child, once a beacon of hope and promise, now seemed shrouded in the darkness of deceit. I realized, with a profound sense of loss, that the woman I loved and the man I admired had together destroyed the sanctuary I had built. In the final moments of that excruciating conversation, I knew that nothing could ever restore what had been lost. "I need time," I said quietly, my voice barely above a whisper. "I need to be alone to think, to decide what I'm going to do with the pieces of my shattered life." Emily's tearful eyes pleaded for forgiveness, but I could not bring myself to grant it. The bond between us, once unbreakable, now lay in ruins, scattered like tinsel on the cold floor of our once happy home. As I walked away from the room, the weight of betrayal pressed down on me like an anchor. I knew that the path ahead would be long and painful, and that the road to healing, if healing were even possible, would be marked by deep scars. In that moment, I resolved to reclaim my dignity and piece together the fragments of a life that had been violently upended. The confrontation was over, but the true journey had only just begun. In the days and weeks that followed the confrontation, the holiday season lost all semblance of its former magic. The joyful echoes of laughter and festive carols were replaced by a heavy, lingering silence, a silence filled with unspoken grief and shattered dreams. I found myself wandering through our once-beloved home as if it were a museum of lost memories, each room a shrine to moments that now seemed both distant and painfully unattainable. Everywhere I looked, I saw reminders of what had been. The Christmas tree, once a radiant symbol of hope and continuity, now stood as a lonely sentinel amid the wreckage of our family's happiness. Ornaments that had once sparkled with cherished memories now gathered dust, their reflective surfaces mirroring back a broken heart. I struggled to understand how a celebration of new life, our child's gender party, could become the backdrop for such profound betrayal. I retreated into solitude, seeking solace in the quiet corners of the winter evenings. Long walks through snow-dusted streets and silent moments by a flickering fireplace became my refuge as I tried to make sense of the shattered pieces of my existence. I began to document my thoughts in a journal, a painstaking effort to capture the raw, unfiltered truth of my emotions. Each entry was a battle between the love I once felt and the searing pain of betrayal, a testament to the struggle of rebuilding a life that had been upended by deceit. Emily, for her part, withdrew into herself. The vibrant woman I had once adored was now a shadow, haunted by regret and the irreversible choices that had led to this calamity. Occasional attempts at conversation were met with tears and stuttering apologies, but the gulf between us had grown too vast to bridge with mere words. Family gatherings became minefields of awkward silences and painful reminders of the trust that had been so brutally shattered. Grandfather Edward's remorse was equally profound. Once a revered patriarch, he now carried the burden of guilt like a cross, a constant reminder of his role in the betrayal that had torn our family apart. His apologies, though heartfelt, could not erase the images of that fateful night or the betrayal that had cut so deeply into the fabric of our lives. As the initial shock began to wear off, I slowly realized that I was faced with a choice. I could let the pain define me, or I could forge a path toward healing and renewal. It was not an easy decision. Every step toward rebuilding felt like a betrayal of the past, a denial of the love and trust that had once been my foundation. But the alternative, to remain trapped in a perpetual state of bitterness and despair, was no way to honor the future that still lay ahead. I sought therapy and the support of close friends who had stood by me through years of joy and sorrow. In long, tear-filled sessions, I learned that healing was not about erasing the pain, but about learning to live with it, to let it shape you into someone stronger, more resilient, and ultimately more self-aware. I began to understand that the scars of betrayal, though permanent, did not have to define my entire existence. Slowly, I started taking tentative steps toward rebuilding my identity. I returned to hobbies that had once brought me joy, reading by a warm fire, capturing the winter landscapes with my camera, and even venturing out into the crisp air with a renewed sense of cautious optimism. Each small act of self-care, Each moment of genuine laughter became a tiny rebellion against the darkness that had threatened to consume me. At home, the process of healing was a constant, painful negotiation. I set boundaries, both for myself and with Emily, as we navigated the difficult terrain of shared history and uncertain future. There were days when the wounds felt so raw that I questioned whether I would ever be whole again. Yet, in the quiet moment of introspection, I discovered that the journey toward healing was not linear. It was a winding path, sometimes filled with setbacks, but always moving forward. In time, I began to see that while the memory of that Christmas scandal would forever linger, it did not have to be the end of my story. The betrayal, as profound and shattering as it was, had forced me to confront truths about love, loyalty, and the fragile nature of trust. And in confronting those truths, I found the strength to redefine my future, a future where honesty, self-respect, and the willingness to embrace life's uncertainties would guide me forward. Now, as I sit by a window watching the soft fall of snow, I write these final words with a sense of cautious hope. The echoes of that fateful day still resonate in my heart, a reminder of the depths of human vulnerability and the strength required to rise above it. I have learned that healing is a process, a journey of rediscovery where each day, no matter how painful, offers a new chance to reclaim the pieces of oneself that were lost. Though the scars of betrayal may never fully fade, they have become part of who I am, a testament to the resilience of the human spirit and the possibility of rebirth even in the aftermath of unimaginable pain. The memory of that Christmas scandal will always remain, but it no longer has the power to define my every waking moment. Instead, I choose to see it as a turning point, a moment that, as devastating as it was, ultimately set me on the path toward a future filled with honesty, growth, and the promise of new beginnings.